Well, a number of us, many Americans, are disappointed that the first act of this new Congress and this new president will be to add $350 billion more of borrowing on the backs of our children and grandchildren. The $350 billion will be in addition to another $350 billion that we approved last year, as well as the nearly $1 trillion we're talking about in stimulus that will be coming up next year. This is not the change that many Americans had hoped for as we enter a new administration. Many of us are very disappointed in how the first round of troubled assets funds have been used. Madam President, it's clear that the intention of the incoming president and the new Democrat majority in Congress are to spend and borrow our way out of this recession. That doesn't work for families, and it's not going to work for our country. More spending and borrowing and printing money may help Washington to grow and prosper, but it's certainly not going to help American families and businesses grow and prosper. It's in this context that we're here today talking about this $350 billion in spending. With all respect to my colleague who just spoke, the easy thing to do is vote for more spending here in Washington. We find it's almost impossible to get people to vote for any cuts in spending. Yet, in spite of our calls for economic relief and economic meltdown situation, Congress refuses to make any sacrifices on what we do here. I'm speaking to support this resolution of disapproval that has been offered by Senator Vitter, and I encourage all of my colleagues to take this responsible step to slow down this avalanche of spending and debt in our country. Some are trying to make us feel a little better about this incredible amount of spending by saying it's not real spending. The government is actually investing in debt of companies and intervening in companies, and that we could get some of this money back. Frankly, that doesn't make me feel any better to know that this government is intervening in the private sector. In every place it touches, it's going to bring new rules and regulations and make our economy less likely to operate as it should. As we know, many who voted for this TARP bill last October now regret that they did it. I didn't vote for it, but many who have issued press releases and talked on this floor being very critical of how it was used and the fact that it hasn't worked. The promises that were made of how this money was going to be used were changed within a couple of weeks of the time the panic was issued here in Washington, and everyone was told they needed to vote for it or there would be worldwide economic calamity. Yet almost before the ink was dry, they changed what they were going to do on the bill. And I think for that reason, many do not trust this whole process of creating a slush fund for an administration, whether it be Republican or Democrat, to spend $700 billion. Last fall, we know what happened in October. There was a crisis mentality. We were told we had to act immediately. Since then, in spite of all the promises, the stock market has fallen nearly 25%, and we're in the same credit problem situation that we had then. It's just too much money to be throwing at the wall in hopes that it might work. I still hear at home, Madam President, that all of this money we put in the system has not worked its way into small business loans or loans for individuals, loans to buy cars, and we have no assurance at this point that an additional $350 billion will do that. I would encourage all my colleagues to look at where we are as a nation. The amount of debt that we have is now approaching $500,000 for every American family. It's very difficult to justify continuing to borrow money when all we're doing is treating the symptoms of the problem. It's amazing to me that we're talking about throwing more money at a problem, and we have yet to address the causes of the problem. We know that the government made many mistakes with government-sponsored entities like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We've not corrected those problems in a way that would show any results. We know we require banks to make loans to people who can't afford to pay them back, and we have not corrected those problems. If you talk to any businessman, and I've been a businessman most of my life, they're not looking for a short-term, knee-jerk solution. They need to have a predictable business environment in order to take risk and make investments and grow their business. If we were looking at real solutions like lowering our corporate tax rate, lowering capital gains that would encourage the nearly $11 trillion of private money that's now sitting on the sidelines, we're not talking about doing anything that's going to encourage this private money to get into the market, into the banking system that would create more liquidity. All we're doing is treating the symptoms, and there's no discussion of really solving the problem. I hope my colleagues will take the telephone calls and the emails that they're getting from their constituents, as I am, seriously. Americans intuitively know that what we're doing here is wrong. And even if it worked for a few months, all of us know that we have to pay it back, our children, our grandchildren, for generations to come, with a lower standard of living, incredibly high taxes, and a devalued currency. Madam President, I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'll yield my time as I just again encourage my colleagues to vote for this resolution of disapproval, and let's figure out how to solve the real problem.